Hey everybody, it's Tommy Canali and welcome to Before the Lights podcast, the show to find out how those in sports, music, and entertainment made their mark. Let's get this one started. Go grab your coffee, or if you prefer, get a drink, and then tell your family, friends, neighbors, and strangers about the show. I'm excited about my guest today. He has a comprehensive background in composing short films, documentaries, and commercials. He is a keyboardist, guitarist, vocalist, and has been a keyboard player with Whitesnake. He is the son of the late actor James Drury, a songwriter, performer, photographer, videographer, and has toured with the Eagles, Don Felder, Stevie Nicks, just to name a few. Spent 25 years traveling. Please welcome to the show, Timothy Drury. Timothy, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Oh, thank you, Tommy. Wow, I don't know how I'm going to live up to that introduction, but that's great.
It's probably your life just flashed before you in a quick 20 seconds.
It did indeed. It's shocking and wonderful. It's great.
Your home is in Sacramento. You're more than welcome. Your home is in Sacramento. You're born and raised in LA. And if you would kind of talk to my listeners about what was it like growing up in California in the 60s?
Wow. Well, growing up in the San Fernando Valley in Southern California it was great back in the 60s. It wasn't quite as densely populated, and the weather was a little bit different then too. I would see snow on the San Gabriel Mountains often in the wintertime. It was cool. It was really cool. And LA is a beautiful place, but now I lived in Sacramento for several years and went to high school there, but now I live with my wife in San Rafael, California, in Marin, which is just like a paradise. A very expensive, but very beautiful place.
Fantastic. Your mother kind of inspired you to get into the music scene. And I understand it came around age 5 with your grandmother's piano.
Yeah, that was the first piano that I ever played. It was my father's mother. And I actually have that piano in my house right now, believe it or not.
Wow. That's cool.
When I was very young, when I was maybe 2 or 3 years old is when I first touched it and played it. And apparently the grandmothers saw that I was interested in it and curious with it. And another piano showed up at my house in Northridge in LA. And the teacher showed up about a week later and he started teaching me these little tunes and learned how to read music. And just never stopped. I mean, never stopped playing the piano my whole life. It's one of my favorite things to do still now.
Yeah, to this day, still playing the piano.
Absolutely.
Being the son of James Drury, who was the Hollywood cowboy, many people know him from The Virginian. And in the movies in the 50s and 60s, he was known as the man with the black hat, the Hall of Great Western Performers. What kind of inspiration did he have, maybe different from your mom had on you, shaping your career?
Well, it's an interesting question because I was able to observe him doing his thing when he was shooting The Virginian when I was a kid. And it was intriguing to watch him work and watch how the production worked and seeing how interested the people there were in capturing something and doing a really great high quality piece of television. But then I also saw him be aggressively sort of not mobbed, but a lot of people really wanting something from him all the time. So there was a flip side that was kind of like, I don't know if I want that. So what I learned was just try to do the best you can in your work, in your creative work, but beware that there's some pitfalls there as well that you have to be aware of in the business and people wanting so much from you and about fame itself. I guess what a strange, odd thing that it is.
Correct, and it's great to hear that you saw that at a young age, going, okay, that's not what I want to be part of. Where some people would look at that and go, yeah, I want that fame. And you were able to recognize early on that that's not for you.
No, that really wasn't my thing. And maybe that's just how I was born, being a little bit more shy, I guess, or retiring, or more wanting to observe and then express once I'm comfortable with what I'm trying to say. Fame and being, applauded and all of that stuff is different. It's a different thing. I love playing in front of audiences. Don't get me wrong, but that was never my thing. I never wanted to be famous. That wasn't the end goal. It was just to do really good work,
True.
That was my main inspiration from him. So he didn't really necessarily teach me that, but I sure did observe a lot of things about his career that were really helpful and inspiring.
And I also understand one time or one day, obviously it was a day, you were on set and you happened to cross paths with the famous Jimmy Stewart.
Yeah, that was in the 80s. It was actually an awards presentation for my dad. It was the Golden Boot Awards. And in those circles, it's kind of a really cool, kind of a big deal. My father received the Golden Boot Award that evening. And so in the audience were all kinds of actors and many Western stars, but not just Western stars. So Jimmy Stewart was there, and he's certainly a Western star as well. He did some great Westerns. So it was a thrill to meet him. I mean, he was 6'4", 6'5", and had these really light blue piercing eyes, and he was amazing. It was really cool. I met Sidney Pollack that same night, the famous director, and that was a big deal for me because I was a huge fan of his work as a producer and director and an actor too, like Tootsie. He's funny as an actor.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Sidney Pollack and a bunch of others. So yeah, that was always fun to kind of rub elbows with those people. I was definitely starstruck with Jimmy Stewart. I mean, come on.
I bet. I mean, that's a night you don't forget in your life when you run into Sidney Pollack and Jimmy Stewart in the same evening.
In the same evening. Yeah. And I was probably, I don't know, in my 20s, I guess, early 20s. It was a fantastic night, actually.
Timothy, when did you start branching out then from the piano to keyboard, guitar, and other instruments?
When I was like 10, 11 years old, junior high school. I started playing the guitar, taught myself how to play the guitar. I was already a pretty decent keyboard player, but I could never really afford keyboards back in the day because they were always so expensive. So friends had guitars and basses and drum kits, and we put our little bands together, garage bands together, and had some fun. We played keg parties. And then from Sacramento, I moved back to Los Angeles and really started getting more into it and auditioning for gigs and whatnot, and just honing other skills, guitar. Primarily a pianist and a keyboard player, but I've done a lot of guitar work as well.
And who were some of your early mentors that you looked up to when you were coming up the ranks?
Well, there's great artists that I always listened to and loved. Sting, Peter Gabriel. I love progressive music, Genesis. Yes, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Keith Emerson, Elton John, great pianist, but storyteller too. Artists like that were my faves.
And that's a Hall of Fame list, basically, that you just rattled off there. You obviously, looked at the right people and took some stuff from each one. Early on, you were a staff writer for Warner Chappell. And if you would, talk to us about what that was like and what some of your duties were as that staff writer.
I had to write songs. I had to come up with a certain amount of songs every year as part of this publishing deal with Warner Chappell. And I would collaborate with other writers and met a lot of producers and writers. And then the people at Warner Chappell, my manager there, would take these songs and try to get them cut. Try to have big artists who were doing records cut my song. And that never happened really during my tenure there at Warner Chappell. But I got a chance meet a lot of people, write some songs, get my studio chops together. It was a great time. It was only after that deal had lapsed that I got my first kind of big cuts, big for me anyway, with Don Henley and Stevie Nicks, which was a thrill for me. But Warner Chappell was a great experience. Met a lot of great people because of it, and paid some bills, and it was actually a very good experience.
Was there anybody that you met at Warner Chappell that may have become a household name that our listeners might be able to recognize that you were actually working with at that time?
Well, yeah. I mean, Sheryl Crow, she's the one who kind of turned me on to that deal, because she had a deal with Warner Chappell, and she told her manager, Judy Stakey, to take a listen to my work, and that turned into a publishing deal. Sheryl was a background singer on Don Henley's first tour, the first tour that I did with him in 1989. And so we became friends and traveled around the world a couple of times. And man, she's become talk about a household name. Fantastic.
Yeah, she's really good. You talked about it. 1989 was a big breakthrough with Don Henley and the end of Innocence tour. It was really your first tour experience. And before I ask you about how that experience was, can you talk to me about how was the audition process? Like, how did you get chosen to be part of this tour?
I found out that Don Henley was looking for a keyboard player for that tour, and he had seen quite a few people in LA, but still wasn't convinced. So a friend of mine gave me the tour manager's phone number, and I called like every day for about a month until they finally caved in and gave me a chance to come in and play. And I went in and played 3 piano tunes, Into the Innocence, Sunset Grill, and New York Minute, all kind of piano-based tunes. And so I played for Henley and the whole band that he had assembled in the rehearsal space, and was thrilled to be there. And then I walked out and didn't hear anything for about a week or so. And then I got another call to come in for a second audition, and I did that. And then about 2 weeks went by and didn't hear anything. And then I finally got a third call for a second callback, I guess, and played the same 3 songs. And they called me about an hour later after that audition and said, "Hey, what are you doing this summer? You want to play with Don?" And yeah, I mean, I screamed into the phone.
Yeah.
It was such a thrill. And I was getting very frustrated in LA and just about ready to kind of bail and move back to Sacramento and do God knows what. But got that gig and kind of changed my life overnight, really.
What do you recall about the first show after getting on tour and stepping on stage for the first time with Don Henley?
Well, I was surprised how comfortable I was. I mean, I was excited and nervous to a certain degree, but more excited than nervous. So just because I hadn't done anything even close to that scope of a show before, it could have led to, me just like not being able to get through it. But I was very comfortable and very prepared, and just felt good. It just felt like, okay, yes, this really feels like I should be here doing this thing. And that kind of, it was great. It was a great thing for that to happen right out of the gate. I won't forget that night ever. It was great in that first tour. So great.
And it's odd to hear because you talk about the comfortability level, and most guests that I have talked to on the show talk about they're excited, but being nervous, whatever they were doing for the very first time, they had to learn to suppress those feelings so they could perform at the level they needed to for whatever they were doing. So to hear that you felt comfortable is really a change. And I love hearing that there's finally somebody out there that did something for the first time and went, this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Well, That's great that it's unique. I don't know. I'm probably not the only guy who's felt that. And I'm not trying to be like, oh yeah, man, it's totally. I was nailed it, right? It's not like that. It's and I did a good job. I did kind of nail it, but it was more like, you don't have to be afraid of this. This is something that you should be doing, and it's good that you're here doing this. And since then, I've always felt much safer on stage than I do out in an audience. I mean, it's hard to go to concerts for me now because it's much louder and it's just much more unpredictable out there in the audience in the venue. And now we can't even go see shows, so it's like a moot point. But
right.
It's about just feeling comfortable and safe, and on stage playing the keyboard. That's safe for me.
And you talked about your preparedness. So you obviously had yourself not even just mentally, but physically and emotionally prepared to walk on stage, and because you wanted to show that Don made a great choice by choosing you to be part of his tour.
Yeah, I wanted to do well for him for sure. And so I wanted to be extremely prepared. And that's just part of the ethos of Don Henley and all of the people who have been in the Eagles and other bands that I've been in as well, but especially that group of guys and creators. They're really, what's the word? Fastidious is one that comes to mind. So there's just a sense of like, hey, this is all great. We're playing music and let's have a good time. But, just know exactly what you got to be doing. Don't have me waiting for you to figure out this song or this sound or this part. Just know it, and then everything will be cool. So early on, I figured that out with the boys, the Eagles and Henley, and continuing to this day with Don Felder, who I've been playing with for years, and now we're sort of on this forced hiatus, and looking forward to playing with him again, and the guys, my band buddies.
I'll bet. And you spoke about touring with the Eagles. That was from 94 to 2000 on the Hell Freezes Over tour. Did the experience with Don Henley then lead you right into the tour with the Eagles, or did you have to audition all over again for that tour?
Well, I was pretty lucky because I think Don Henley sort of had a list of people that he wanted to work with him on that tour. Glenn Frey had a list, and it was really mainly about the two of them and the lists that they had of people that they had been working with. I mean, everybody chimed in and contributed and decided, I'm sure. But for me, I was on that short list of, guys from Henley's touring band. And he's like, okay, well, here's my guys. Who do you have? And so they kind of figured it out. But I was lucky enough to be on that list and stayed on that list for a period of years. And it was great. Hell Freezes Over, huge tour, biggest thing I've ever done. Wow, it was kind of a historically large and anticipated kind of tour. So that was cool. It was sort of a pressurized situation too, a little bit. It had its fun moments, but it was just so big and so many people were counting on this thing doing well and being big that it was pressurizing, I guess. You had to be on your toes all the time. And fair enough. And that's what I tried to do.
And you answered the question that I was going to ask is, how much different was the tour with this iconic band, the Eagles, compared to the End of Innocence tour with Don Henley? And you just kind of spoke about how much different that was, because I can only imagine the change in the atmosphere from the Don Henley tour to now you're in the Hell Freezes Over with the Eagles, and the atmosphere in the crowd had to be just electric every night.
Oh yeah. Lots of people in the audience, usually stadiums that we were playing in, and everybody had been waiting for them to reunite for many years. So here it was. So yeah, it was very exciting, but a little bit different. Don Henley ran a pretty tight ship, no question about it. But there was a little bit more of an opportunity for us to all hang out together as a band after a show and go to dinner and have some laughs. During the Eagles tour, there wasn't as much opportunity for that because the principal players, they all kind of had their own scene and kind of did their own. We all traveled together, but everybody kind of had their own sort of scene. And the four background guys, we kind of stuck together and would do our thing. So I didn't get to spend a lot of time with Don Henley on that tour. I kind of spent more time with Don Felder, and we became tight during that time because he wanted to hang out and have fun. So he was always down for going out for dinner and hanging out in different cities that we were in. So that was cool. It was a tight ship, and you had to show up and be good every time.
I can imagine.
Great. And I love that. I love having to do that. It was a good thing.
2001, you co-wrote Stevie Nicks' single "That Made Me Stronger," which was produced by your friend Sheryl Crow, Stevie Nicks, and Jeff Trott. Where did the introduction come to for you to have the opportunity to write a song with Stevie Nicks?
Well, let's see. That was probably my writing partner, Scott Crago, who I wrote that tune with, and also the song that I co-wrote with Don Henley was with Scott Crago. Scott had played drums with Stevie years before and was still in touch with her. And he knew that she was looking for songs for her record. So when Scott and I would get together, we would think about what would Henley want to hear? What would Stevie want to hear? What would be a good song for them to sink their teeth into? And so that's how it happened. We made a demo, and Scott handed it to Stevie. I think that's probably what happened. And then we both handed the Henley demo to Don because we were playing with him at the time, and he liked it, and he drove around in his car and wrote lyrics and kind of a melody to that thing. And then we recorded that with Don anyway. I know you were asking about Stevie, but
no, that's fine. And that Don Henley single that he's referring to is called "Everything Is Different Now," which is found on the Greatest Hits package by Don Henley. So if you know the song, great. If you don't, you need to check it out.
Yeah, that was a cool thing. I got to actually do the guitar solo on that song. That was a fun moment for me as a keyboard player. But I had done the guitar solo on the demo at home, and Henley really liked the solo, wanted to kind of recreate it. And he had Mike Campbell give it a shot, but Mike didn't seem very interested in trying to play somebody else's solo, and totally fair enough. But he kind of left the session and kind of in a slight huff, and and I was there, and Henley looked over and went, "Okay, well, we lost Mike. Let's what do you think, Timothy? You want to give this a shot?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course. Let's try it." I did it at home, so let's do it again. But Don, he wanted me to like every nuance of the solo that I did at home. He wanted me to recreate, which is interesting. It took a couple of tries to do it justice, but when you're playing a solo, you don't remember. And sometimes there's accidents that happen that you can't recreate. At least for me, because I'm a decent guitar player, but not like a genius shredding guitar player by any chance, by any stretch. But it was a thrill. So that's my solo. If you hear that song, me playing the guitar solo.
It's a great song. I just actually listened to it yesterday again. It's a really good song.
Great, man. Cool.
Yeah. In 2003 to 2010, you were with Whitesnake, and in 2008 you toured as a member of the band's world tour and Good to Be Bad. Where did the introduction come from? You toured with Don Henley, you toured with the Eagles, and now somebody contact you and say, "Hey, Whitesnake needs a guy"?
friend of mine had been playing with Whitesnake, and then Derek Hilland. I'm sorry, Derek. Derek had called me and said, "Hey, Timothy, I can't do this Whitesnake tour. I'm with Rick Springfield, and I can't leave now." And so he hooked me up with David Coverdale, and I was in San Jose at the time visiting a buddy of mine who had a piano in his living room, and Coverdale called me, and I put the phone right on the piano, and he said, "Well, go ahead and play something for me." Right. And I, okay, man. So I put the phone on the piano and just started blowing a little bit, and he seemed good with that. That was my audition for David Coverdale, and he knew that I had been playing with the Eagles and Don Henley. You can't. There's a certain kind of base level of skill at that point. There just is, you know. So he was good with it, and toured and recorded with them for 7 years. It was great. Traveled more with Whitesnake than I ever did with the Eagles and Henley. Went places I never went with them, and so it was great for the travel. And it was a lot of touring. We would go out for many months at a time, so it was pretty hardcore. Great fun. A lot looser of a setup than Henley or the Eagles. More opportunity to kind of, you know, stretch a little bit on stage and make mistakes and not be so worried about that. Just having really good fun.
And you also performed on their album Forevermore.
Yeah.
When you talk about the whole opportunity and the experience with Whitesnake, what kind of resonates in your mind, Timothy, when you look back at, you just kind of hinted on a little bit, but you play with Don Henley, you play with the Eagles. Sounds like Whitesnake was more of a laid back tour. You had a little bit more fun with them. But when you look back at the experience of Whitesnake, what comes to your mind first off? Is it the fun, or was it just the camaraderie with that band?
Oh, it was a physical gig. You know, I stood up and bounced around, and that kind of music lends itself to just a real sweaty, kind of more muscular experience than the peaceful easiness of the Eagles kind of family of songs. Or you know what I'm getting at?
Sure.
You know, Whitesnake, and you know, Whitesnake has plenty of detractors and people who will poke fun, and it's a hair band and it's kind of Spinal Tap, but there's some amazing songs there too. And one of the greatest voices in rock history, David Coverdale, undeniably, you know,
for sure.
So there was a raw physical power that would happen on stage that the Eagles, they just couldn't even approach that kind of kinetic energy. Not to say it's bad or good. It's just that wasn't a part of their thing. And Whitesnake was all about the raw power of rock, you know, and gigantic sounds. And I would play a pad or a string line or an organ sound, and you could actually hear it in the house in a big, gigantic way. So that's something that I really, really enjoyed. It made me smile, and it was a great workout, and I sweat from head to toe every night where I could wring out my shirt and stuff. So that was great. That was fun for me. And it served its purpose, and I had a great time with them. And now I feel more comfortable doing what I'm doing now, my own stuff. Playing with Don is great, but I'm doing my own shows and composing and playing my own stuff, and it's much more suited to my just pace of life at this point.
Yeah, and that's right where I'm heading to now, because you've really gotten into the arts, and I understand your uncle was a painter, an actor, a writer, and you kind of got the love of photography. Was that through him, and was he the driving force and kind of inspired you to really look into photography?
Well, no. And I have to, you know, you asked me earlier about mentors and stuff, and I didn't really answer you that I can recall. But John, my uncle, was a massive influence on me in terms of the arts. And and in terms of just the wonderful irony of things in life. He was a very, very funny, very talented man. And I wound up spending quite a bit more time with John than I did with my own father for a variety of circumstances and reasons, but spent a ton of time with John. So he was a terrific painter. So the visual art thing was definitely from him, but not photography, because I didn't really know him as a photographer, even though he did have a degree in cinematography from UCLA Film School, and he knew about photography. No, photography. Like who was the first person who got me into it? I don't know. There was always a camera in the house, or a film camera, or a Super 8 camera, and the gear was intriguing to me. So I think it was just in the house. Maybe my mom. I mean, I might have to attribute that to her as well. And then I had great friends as time went on who taught me how to print and how to process my own film and how to shoot and all these different things. My friend Jerry Tarshis, who was a brilliant Ukrainian man who has passed away, but he taught me everything that I knew at that moment was from him. And then I expanded and learned my own stuff after that. But he was great. He was really a great shooter and great friend.
Do you remember what your first camera was?
Yeah, the first real sort of semi-serious camera that I got was in Manhattan. I was on tour with Don Henley, and it was 1990 probably when I bought this camera, 89 or 90. It was an Olympus OM 88 SLR camera, and loved it. And then I had a little Pentax, little pocket camera. It was kind of like a spy camera, a silver Pentax. That was a great camera too. Then I started shooting with Holgas, which are plastic cameras. They're like $15 plastic cameras, and they're medium format. So you put medium format into this kind of silly plastic camera with a plastic lens, and you get these fantastic accidents that happen. Some of my most favorite pieces that I've shot are on this little $15 camera, believe it or not.
That's fantastic to hear. So you don't need expensive equipment to put out quality product, because everybody get that. You don't have to save and give away your life savings to make quality product. Timothy here did it on a $15 camera, so it's out there, people.
Yes, but I will say the one caveat is it depends on what you're trying to shoot. I mean, all my stuff is so totally personal that I can do that. And I can go, wow, I love that. That's great. But if you're shooting a wedding, or if you're shooting products, or if you're doing professional, portrait photography, you do have to have a certain amount of gear, and you have to spend a little money. It all depends on what you're trying to do, I think.
I've heard you on another podcast that you turned me on to listen to, which I greatly appreciate. And you hinted on this, and a good friend of mine has talked about this as well. And it's something with photographers and the passion that comes out when you mention the room, dark room. It's something that lights up in a photographer when you talk about the days of being in a dark room and the smells and the images that you could create and all this other stuff. Can you talk about your experiences and what you remember about dark rooms and what you were able to create in those rooms?
Oh, it was magic. I mean, it was total magic. And I was one of those little kids who loved being like in a fort or in the dark closet with a light bright, or darkness with interesting light inside of it was always my thing. I'm like the anti of claustrophobic. I just love that kind of feeling. And so the darkroom gives you a lot of that working in the darkness. And then periodically you'll have this red light or orange light that will come on, and then you'll see things starting to appear in this bath of water as you manipulate the paper in this liquid, and it appears, and it's the stunning, kind of, how can this be happening? It seems like ancient mystical kind of powers at play, but it's and it is, I guess, but it's a simple process too, by the same token. But man, you would, I'd spend weeks in the darkroom. I'd come out for food, sleep occasionally, but there would be periods like that week would go by and I wouldn't be on the road. And every day I'd just kind of fall out of bed, have some coffee, have a bite, and then just go in. And then it would be late afternoon and I'd come out and I just made thousands of prints, thousands and thousands of prints, trying to get at the one that I really, really liked. And now there's so many other ways to get at that final end, but I miss having to do it on that piece of paper. And if I wanted to accentuate something or blur something, I had to actually do it with my hands or fingers or a piece of cardboard, and I had to really decide how much light to hit that paper with at that moment. So that's something that you miss now when you're working in Photoshop and doing edits. And it's great and powerful, and you can get some great results. But the darkroom, the experiential part of it, you cannot recreate.
Never. I was only in the darkroom for a brief time during some high school class, so I obviously can't relate to what you're speaking about and what my friend speaks about. But there's something like when you said magical, it's like the eyes in a photographer starts to like shudder, like for a lack of better words in photography. Like when you say darkroom, it's like this aha moment. And if I could just get my hands back around a darkroom right now, I'd go in a second.
Yeah. And I'm not even sure if I would, to be honest, because I'd have to learn it again. I'd have to spend so much time, just the commitment of time. Although I do have quite a bit of time on my hands at the moment. But it was quite a thing. The darkroom. Yeah, every photographer who spent time in the darkroom will always have that kind of feeling about it, the magic about it.
Where I want to go next is you have something called the Performance Cube, and I am fascinated by this. This is fantastic. And people, there's going to be a link in the show notes, and I always refer my listeners to go to something in the show notes. And this is the thing on this show you need to go click on. First and foremost, outside of Timothy's website, which is timothydrury.com. That's timothydrury.com. But you also need to check out the Performance Cube. It's this atmospheric that has this fantastic music and melodies and cinematic music behind it, and this imagery that's around Timothy, and he's in the middle of this cube. And I know you can explain this a lot better than I can, so I'm going to turn it over to you and let you talk about it.
Well, that's essentially what it is, what you just said, at its very basic form. It's an 8-foot by 8-foot frame, and it's covered with sheer fabric, right, from top to bottom. And I'm inside of this 8-foot cube with my keyboard and my gear, and I have a projector outside the cube behind me. So I'm rear projecting my imagery onto this cube, and when it hits the back side of the cube, it kind of goes through the fabric as well. The light doesn't just stop on the screen. It keeps traveling. So it essentially fills up this whole cube with imagery. And I'm in silhouette inside of this thing and playing my music, my kind of film score, sort of instrumental music along to my films. And it's really cool.
It's really cool. How did you come up with the idea?
Well, I mean, people have been projecting and rear projecting in theatrical productions for a long, long time. So it's not, I didn't invent rear projection, but I just always had a notion of wanting to project images while I was playing, either on the wall or on a piece of fabric or through glass or something. So I started experimenting with fabrics, different thicknesses of fabrics, and I would kind of tack them up to the wall, right? Big pieces of fabric. And then I started moving the fabric a little bit away from the wall, like a foot or two. And I noticed that the projection would go through the screen and then hit the white wall behind it. And it was like, oh, wow, look at that. It's kind of like this dimensional thing that happens. And then I would look through the side of that, down the length of the space between the screen and the wall, and it started to have a shape in my mind. And I figured, why don't I make a box now, a big box shape, and so on and so forth. And that's how it turned into this cube-shaped thing with rear projection, and I'm inside of it. And it was just so much fun to be inside that space. So like I'm inside my work. I'm inside the sound of what I'm playing, literally and figuratively. And so it kind of became this really comfortable, beautiful sort of display of all of my work. And that's what it is. The cube, the Drury's cube.
Do you choreograph in the music and the images together, or you just go play music as you feel when you get in there?
Well, it's a mixture of both of those things. I play, and then there's a few pieces of music where I'm playing along with tracks that I've created, or some sort of percussion element to just keep the time flowing. And so I can play along with these backing tracks. And so some of the films that I've made do have a synced quality. Like some things will land right when a percussive moment happens, perhaps. And then there's times where it's just me playing a piano sound, just throughout, just stream of consciousness with imagery going by. And that's much more of a loose, not synced kind of thing. And then a sound will happen in one of the films, and that will be my cue to, get ready. Here comes another piece that you're going to play along with, kind of thing. It sort of flows like that.
Two more questions before we wrap up here. One is, if you would talk about, on the website, people, you'll see that Timothy has these beautiful pieces of artwork, and he also has these imagery lamps, which is almost like a mini cube, so to speak, as well. And the pieces are fantastic. But can you talk about where the idea came from being a photographer to going, I think I'm going to put these together and start selling these and getting paid for my work?
Well, that happened a long time ago. I mean, I've been doing gallery shows and outdoor art festivals for decades, especially in Los Angeles. I did many, many shows and sold a good deal of photographic prints and framed artwork. And then I developed the image lamps, which is a table lamp, 4-sided table lamp with my pictures sandwiched into the glass of the lamp. And it's a really beautiful piece in a dark room. There's dark room again. A lamp, and it's got a dimmer switch on it. And so it's a beautiful display of 4 of my images in this lamp. And I've sold quite a few of those too. And I designed it, and I have a guy in East LA who crafts, who puts together the wooden frame, and then I assemble the whole thing and get the glass cut, and I do the wiring, and I do the printing and put it together and ship it out. And it's been, it was a way to display my work and have people enjoy it. But, I've enjoyed being able to get paid to continue this process as an artist, and to have some patrons who over the years have bought a lot of my work, a lot of big pieces, and some corporate clients that I've had who have bought big pieces or a big run of things, or an artist who I did some portraiture for, portrait photography. We sold a lot of his posters and whatnot. So, and I enjoy that. It's not my intent when I'm doing it and creating it, but to be able to make some sort of a return on that with collectors and people who want to have that work in their house, that makes me feel really good. And especially during this time where I can't really go out and play live shows, which I've been doing for years. This website now is finally a way that people will have a portal to be able to purchase my work if they want to. I haven't really had that. It's all been word of mouth, or galleries have shown my work. But this is a way that it's all in one place and people can see the work, ask me questions about it, contact. I'm very easy to contact and consult with this stuff. And that's what I'm trying to do with my time. I want to be creative. I want to do my artwork. I'm making films. I'm writing more music. I want to consult with people. I want to produce. I want to mentor people who are interested in my experiences on the road and whatnot, and how to work in the studio, all that kind of thing. So I'm available, and that site, timothydrury.com, is really the place to reach me.
You heard it right from him. That's where you connect. It'll be in the show notes as well. Last question, Timothy, before we wrap up, is with all this COVID and things shut down, what's the hardest thing for you to continue to stay motivated to write more music and do more photography and keep yourself going forward?
What's the hardest part about that?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, man. The hardest thing for me right now is not being able to just to link up with people. I mean, I was used to having the energy of thousands of people every year at shows and flying and hotels and traveling. And there's always this like influx of people's energy, right? And so now I'm mainly at home in my studio, which has been fantastic. But, you know, there's times where it's really quiet and a little bit lonely, I guess. I'm missing the camaraderie and just that kind of energetically is what I'm missing more than anything. And then, you know, sometimes as an artist, you go through periods of trying to understand why you do what you do. Like, why am I making this song? Why am I making this photograph? Do people like it? Are they going to buy it? What's going to happen? That kind of stuff. Those sort of thoughts come through every artist's mind, I think, from time to time. So I got to fight that. I got to fight this sort of what's the point of all of this kind of feeling, and just get into my studio and do work because it's worth doing. It's worth doing something that I really do truly love, playing and expressing myself with films and images. I just have to continue to do that and hope that people continue to reach out through this online kind of portal with me to link up and create sort of an energetic thing until we can get back out there and play live again. But that's the thing. It's just a little too quiet.
I agree. You know, for me, I took for granted, and I never, until just recently, never realized how much I missed just meeting a friend for a drink. I always took that for granted. And now it's like, I can't remember the last time I met a friend out just to go have a drink. You know, you miss that camaraderie and being interactive with somebody like you talked about over just a simple drink or a dinner. I mean, we all go to dinners now at restaurants, but everything has changed. It's not the same. Like the atmosphere in all the places has been completely wiped out and zapped. It's like we're in this bad dream and we can't wake up.
Yeah, and I'm not liking it. I mean, I've gone out with my wife a couple of times to our date night spot. We have a wine club that we go to, Mantra Wine in Novato, and they were closed for a long time. They reopened for outdoor seating, and we go and we have our masks on, and everybody's kind of distanced. But every time somebody coughs or sneezes, I'm like, oh no, they're a carrier. You know, or it puts me like a knot in my stomach, and that's the last thing I want to feel when I'm out with my wife to have some champagne or something. I don't want to feel that way. So is sort of a mess. It's a good thing that my wife and I both cook pretty well. We like being in the kitchen, and so we've been able to do that together. But man, I do miss going out to have a meal or sushi or a great martini at a wonderful bar somewhere in San Francisco, or a dive bar somewhere. And those are like ground zero of where you don't want to go kind of places. So
right,
it's bumming me out. A little too quiet. But
yes,
the artwork is kind of getting me through. That's keeping me like with a goal of just creating more art. That's what I do, and I got a bunch of time right now to do that, and I am doing it. So there.
Timothy, thank you so much for your time today and being on the show. This has been a treat for me.
Oh, thanks, man. Thank you for your questions and your interest, and really appreciate it. It was great.
Thank you. Everybody else, if you want to subscribe to the show, that would be greatly appreciated. You can find Before the Lights podcast anywhere pods are found, such as Apple, Spotify, iHeart. If you'd like to reach out to me, you can shoot me an email, beforethelightspod@gmail.com. Please check out the show notes on our website, beforethelightspod.com. Follow us on Instagram, Before the Lights Podcast. Thank you for listening to Before the Lights. I'm Tommy Canale. Until next time, everybody, a salute, a chin chin.